Right. So when the price increases from zero point 0.5 to 1 and the quantity supplied increases from 1 to 2, we want to take out the price elasticity of supply for it. So basically, when the quantity increases from 1 to 2, that's about 100% increase in supply. And when the price increases from zero point 0.5 to 1, that's also 100% increase in supply. And turns out that the PES for the first change is equals to 1. Then secondly, let's try to do this also. So far what we have is when the price was zero point 0.5 and quantity supplied was 1, and then it went to 1 key price and you were supplying 2, so exactly what happened. Okay, so now we're going to see if PES is equals to 1 say 1.5, that's about a 50% increase in change in price, and that's about a 50% change in the quantity, and we're getting equals to 1. So what we have is that the price elasticity of supply for my first diagram is actually equals to 1 throughout for every change in the price. For the second one, when we do it, so for the second one, when we do it, price going from this to this, and price rises 2 and 2, तो फिर इसकी जब मैं इलास्टिसिटी निकालता हूँ फॉर S2 के डायग्राम फॉर दिस रेंज, so quantity going from 1 to 2 is about 100%, and the change in the price is also 100%, and turns out the value is equals to 1 for this one as well. In fact, let's try and do it for the third one also. So in the third one, we're saying when the price is 2, okay, let me just take this out. When the price is 2, quantity supplied is 1, right here on S3. And when the price increases to 4, quantity supplied increases to 2. So let's find out the PES for this range. And when we do our math for it, this is about 100% increase, and 2 to 4 is also 100% increase equals to 1. So when we look at the diagram, this one looks much more steeper and this one looks much more flatter. But turns out the PES for each diagram is actually equals to 1. They're all unitary price elastic. So does that mean that the steepness and the flatness has nothing to do with the elasticity? Well, in fact, it does. Let me tell you why this PES is equals to 1. If you take a ruler and you extend these lines, okay, if I extend these lines, there's one thing in common. They are all branching out from the origin, 0 point. Now remember, I'll put a note here. If a supply curve starts from the origin, if a supply curve starts from the origin, then their PES will be equals to 1. And not just for any one price change, it will be the same for every single price change. This entire curve will have PES equals to 1 throughout its range because they're starting from the origin. Alright, so we have three supply curves over here. This time they're different from the previous case. They're not all starting from the origin. So S1 के ऊपर let's do a calculation and see how it looks. S1 says that when the price was 3, quantity supplied was 1, and when the price increases to 4, quantity supplied increases to 2. So when we do the price velocity of supply for this, the percentage change in quantity goes from 1 to 2, that's about 100% increase. And price goes from 3 to 4, that's about 33.3%. So it turns out the elasticity is 3. So for this range on my graph, I'm marking that elasticity is 3 for this particular range. Now, I'm going to see when the price goes from 4 to 5, how will my elasticity be? Will it be the same? Will it increase? Or will it actually fall down? So when we do it, so what we get is the quantity has gone from 2 to 3, that's about a 50% increase. And the price goes from 4 to 5, that's about 25% increase. So as a result, the elasticity is 2. So for the second price range, the elasticity is actually 2. So what we can conclude from this is a couple of things. When I extend my supply curve, it turns out it starts from the y-axis. Okay. So whenever a supply curve starts from the y-axis, that means its elasticity will always be greater than 1. It's going to be elastic. But as I'm moving up the curve, the elasticity is going to fall for it. Now let's try it. In our previous case, we saw that whenever the supply curve starts from the origin, it will always have elasticity equals to 1. And in fact, even if you go up the curve, equals to 1 will remain. Okay, so I don't need to do calculation for this one. However, I'm going to do the calculation for this. One thing I know is since it's starting from the x-axis, it will have a PES which will be less than 1. Now let's do the math to see whether it's going to remain at that. So for example, the first point is the price is 1, quantity supplied is 3. When the price goes up to 4, quantity supplied goes up to 4. So our PES for this price range, you have a 33.3% increase in quantity supplied, and you have going from 1 to 2 about 100% increase in this. Just be sure how quantity will always go above and price will always go below. Don't get lost in the calculation. So for this range, the PES is 0.33, which is less than 1, obviously. And how about if we go up the range? If we go from price of 2 to price of 3, how will the PES will change for this? So when you're going from 4 to 5, that's about a 25% increase in the supply, and there is a 50% increase in the quantity, giving you 0.5. So the PES for the later range is 0.5. So if you see, now this knowledge will apply in AS a lot more, AS levels. For O levels, at least for now, let's just see that if the supply curve starts from the y-axis, the value will always be greater than 1. If it starts from the origin, it will always be equals to 1. If it starts from the x-axis, it will always be less than 1. When it's greater than 1 and you're increasing the price, the elasticity's numbers will get smaller and smaller. When it is inelastic and as you go above, as you increase the price, the elasticity numbers will actually increase. On equals to 1, as you go above, nothing will happen, it will remain the same. So let's put in the summary of it. Let's have all elasticities into discussion now. If your PES is greater than 1, it is price elastic. If it's equals to 1, it is unitary. If it's less than 1, it's called inelastic. If it's 0, it's perfectly inelastic. And if it's infinity, then it's perfectly elastic. Now, how will the shapes be like? So for the first one, if I have to make a unitary, we've learned about unitary that it always starts from the origin. So it can be, uh, it could have been like this, it could have been like that. As long as it's starting from the origin, it will always have velocity equals to 1. Let me just mark it, PES equals to 1. If it's perfectly inelastic, with perfectly inelastic, we know the quantity cannot change. So it's going to be like that. No matter how much price changes, the quantity will not change at all. As far as inelastic goes, it has to be steep. Okay? Your PES is less than 1, somewhat like this. If we are making for elastic, should be nice and flat. That's elastic. And finally, if we're making for perfectly elastic, that's going to be a completely horizontal line. And you can see as you are moving in this direction, your elasticity is increasing from all the way from 0 to infinity, and the steepness and all of that is sort of like explaining the idea still is percentage change in quantity versus the percentage change in price.